Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have part 4 of The Person Controller by David Baddiel, continuing from chapter 20, Ellie, Premium Edition. "Is this really going to work?" said Ellie. She was standing in front of the playroom mirror. Fred was next to her, holding the controller. "I don't know," said Fred. "Will it hurt?" Fred paused a second before answering. "No, I don't think so. None of that jumping about has hurt me so far." "Okay, go for it." "Where do you want to start? Who do you want to look like?" Ellie thought for a moment. "I don't know, I guess. What do they make girls look like in video games?" Fred thought. "Same as they do in cartoons and films and stuff. The pretty ones all look the same. Do you want to look like that?" Ellie shrugged nervously. "We could see, I suppose, what it was like." Fred nodded. He looked down at the controller, not sure what to press. He went first for a long press of the amber button. Ellie's face went red as a tomato and her cheeks blew up like a hamster. Sorry," said Fred. Quickly he tried the ruby button while toggling the control. Ellie's face sprouted a long white beard, and her feet became as big as clown's feet. "Okay, maybe we should forget this," she said, her voice quite a little deeper than usual. "No, wait a minute. Let me have one more go." Fred focused on the controller. He remembered what Ellie had said when she first started to really understand how to work the device, how she had been thinking about Super Mario to make him jump through the air. So this time, while pressing the buttons, diamond and silver this time alternately, he concentrated and tried to call up in his mind all the images in his memory of the main girl characters in video games and cartoons and films. He thought of Princess Peach and Amy Rose and Misty and Princess Fiona and Sam the TV reporter and Joy and Elsa and Rapunzel and Mulan and Ariel and Sleeping Beauty all the way back to Snow White. And Ellie's braces and glasses disappeared. "Oh my God," she said. "Can you see okay?" said Fred. "Yes," said Ellie. "Keep going." Fred pressed the emerald button. Suddenly Ellie's eyes grew bigger, much bigger. They seemed to take up loads of her face, but it was okay because her nose had got smaller, making room for them. "Do you like it?" said Fred. Ellie was looking at herself in the mirror. "I think you might be able to see the effect more if you shut your mouth," said Fred. Ellie did so, then looked at herself again. "Have my lips got bigger?" she said. "Yes, and redder, and shaped like a heart." "Okay," she said. "It's weird. But do you like it?" She half nodded. I think so." Fred took this as meaning he should carry on. So his fingers went back to the controller's buttons. And Ellie changed shape. She grew a few centimetres taller, and simultaneously her neck became longer. Her waist contracted, and her shoulders expanded, so that her top half looked like an upside-down triangle. Sister and brother looked on, amazed. "What about my, said Ellie, pointing to the back of her head. "On it," said Fred. Fred's fingers continued to work. Ellie's pigtails vanished, and her hair, it didn't just grow, it flowed from her scalp in waves. Oh, said Ellie, as it settled on her shoulders, looking glossy and full and shiny and all the other things people said about hair in their mum's magazines. But, in the mirror, she didn't have time to look at that properly before her school uniform, which had instantly tailored itself to fit her new shape, started changing colour, flashing red, black, gold. "What's it doing?" said Ellie. "Offering up suggestions, I think," said Fred. "What colours do you want?" "I don't know." Fred went for black and gold, a tiny bit like the colours a posh chocolate might be wrapped in. As he did so, Ellie's school uniform stopped looking like a school uniform at all, and more like a beautiful party dress. He stopped pressing the buttons. Ellie looked at her entire new self in the mirror. She shook her head with disbelief. "What do you think?" said Fred. "It's amazing," said Ellie. "But do I even look like myself anymore?" Fred turned his head to the mirror, considering. "Yes," he said after a while. "You look like Ellie, but upgraded. Ellie 2.0. Ellie Premium Edition." Ellie took this in. It certainly sounded good. Although, to be honest, Fred often expressed himself in video game language. "What about when Mum and Dad see me?" she said. "What am I going to tell them? About how I look, and where I got these clothes, and... God, there you are." Fred and Ellie turned around. Their mum was standing at the door of the playroom with her arms crossed, staring hard at the two of them. Chapter 21. You're my stylist. "What have you two been doing in here?" said Janine from the doorway. "Oh, don't tell me." She looked at the controller in Fred's hands. "Video games. I knew it. You're addicted. Completely addicted. I've had to miss nearly 4 minutes of Cash in the Attic searching for you." Fred and Ellie looked at each other with deadpan expressions on their faces. They were much younger than their mother, obviously, but the irony of what she had just said was lost only on Janine Stone. "And it's the Christmas Celebrity Edition with Cheryl Baker, isn't it, Eric?" "It is, Janine," said Eric, appearing at his wife's shoulder. "Anyway," said Janine, "tea's ready." "Is it bacon sandwiches?" asked Eric. No, of course it isn't. That's a breakfast option. And besides, it's not your tea, it's their tea. Oh, OK. Both adults turned to leave. Fred looked to Ellie. Ellie looked to Fred. Together they shook their heads, amazed. Hang on a minute, said Janine, suddenly coming back through the door with a suspicious look on her face. Ellie? Yes, Mum. Look at me, said Janine. Ellie gazed at her mum through her newly widened eyes. She tried not to look down at her new premium self. Ellie Stone, tell me the truth. Yes, Mum. Have you fed Margaret Scratcher? Ellie frowned. Fred frowned. No, she said. I knew it, said Janine. You promised to feed her this afternoon, and you've just been too lazy to do it. But I could tell you felt guilty about it. I could see it in your eyes. Can't hide anything from you, Janine, came Eric's voice from outside. Tell me about it, Eric, said Janine triumphantly, turning around and leaving the room. Ellie and Fred exchanged glances. Then they both shrugged. Ellie, said Fred, I think even though Mum and Dad didn't notice that you'd changed, I should probably change you back to normal for now. And then I can make you look like this again for the party. OK, said Ellie. Good thinking, but hold on. What, said Fred. You never did shoes. I did. I don't mean the clown shoes. I mean some proper shoes to go with, she gestured to herself, all this. OK, what sort? High heels? Really? Have you ever worn high heels? No, well, I tried on a pair of Mum's once. Oh, yes, and you fell over. OK. I'll leave it to you. You're my stylist. Fred smiled, pleased with this idea. He pressed the silver button 3 times and thought of shoes, fairy tale shoes. Ellie looked down. Her normal, ordinary trainers had vanished. On her feet, perfectly fitting, were 2 silver slippers, glittering with light. She turned to her brother gratefully. Yes, Cinderella, he said with a smile. You shall go to Rashid's party. Part 2. Upgrade. Chapter 22. Most improved. That was incredible. Not just incredible, amazing. It was the best goal I've ever seen outside of the Premier League and the World Cup. What, the second goal or the third? I thought the fourth was the best. Yes, the way he caught the ball on the back of his neck before flicking it up onto his head and knocking it down for a left foot volley. That was the best one. Fred just smiled, listening to the things the 10 other boys in the Bracket Wood First 11 were saying as they carried him aloft on their shoulders off the pitch. He could hear the applause and cheering of lots of others. The rest of the school, in fact, who were standing on the touchline. I can't believe we've finally beaten Geary Road. 7-0. They haven't even beaten us by that much, ever. Well, they beat us 8-0 last year. Not the same. This means we're in the final. Yes, the Bracket Wood and surrounding area inter-school winter trophy final. Yes, all because of Fred. Oh no, said Fred, shaking his head in a way that A, wasn't believable, and B, made the boy underneath him, who was called Pradgett, and who, despite being the goalie, wasn't actually the biggest player on the team, wobble dangerously for a moment. It's a team game. It's a team game, said Mr. Barrington, suddenly appearing, because Fred was on Pradgett's shoulders, at eye level. Up close, his eyes looked enormous through his enormous lenses. It was, Fred thought, like having a staring match with a fish in a tracksuit. But there's simply no doubt that your individual performance was the best I've ever seen. I knew I was right to put you on the team, even for a game as important as this, a semi-final. It's a flash in the pan, some said after your trial. Others said, I don't understand it, he's always been rubbish before, but I said no. There's a young footballer with real class, who would make a real difference in our team, and it was because of that I decided that you were... Mr. Barrington? Yes, Fred? No, that wasn't me speaking, it was Pradgett. Mr. Barrington looked down. Ah, yes, Pradgett, what is it? Sorry to interrupt, but I'm about to fall over. All right, Pradgett, I've nearly finished. Surely you can hold on for another 2 minutes. OK. Mr. Barrington looked back up. What I really wanted to say, Fred, was that you are, without any doubt, the most improved player I have ever seen. How on earth have you done it? All the faces on the team looked at Fred. His face, though, wasn't looking back at them. It was pointing in another direction, towards the crowd where, among all the boys and girls, waving Bracket Wood scarves, he could see Ellie. She was doing a thumbs up with her right hand. In the left hand, he could see she was still holding the controller. When she saw him looking at her, she raised that up too, so that both her hands were in the air. Well, said Fred. Speak up, said Mr. Barrington. I think the whole school should share in this moment. The whole school should know exactly what it was that made you suddenly such a great player. I would like you to speak up and tell us exactly how you did it. Chapter 23. Flashback. So, before we hear Fred's answer, you need to know that some time has passed. The White's Christmas lights don't even look out of place anymore. Eric has taken the unusual step of putting up some of his own lights outside the Stones' flat. Margaret's scratcher has got considerably fluffier as it has got colder, and Fred and Ellie have been making a lot of use of the controller. They've used it to do their chores. You can tidy your room very quickly when 2 flicks will propel you from the floor to the cupboard and back again. Plus, Ellie found that if she pressed amber plus diamond while Fred was pointing at a pile of clothes, they just folded themselves up automatically. They've used it to make boring car journeys more exciting, and neither Eric nor Janine even noticed that their children were doing somersaults on the roof. They even used it to spice up trick-or-treating at Halloween. It's amazing how much more frightening, and therefore how many more sweets people will give you, a cheap skeleton costume becomes when it's leaping up the side of a house. And of course they used it at the November school football team trial. A lot of the other boys and Mr. Barrington looked pained when they saw Fred approaching, all kitted up and smiling. The words "not again" and "how are the shoelaces doing" and "oh no, he's brought his nerd sister along" were muttered. However, 1 bit of keepy-uppy, 2 back heels, 3 drag and goes, 4 zigzags and 5 goals later, the muttering had stopped. Had turned in fact to cheering and applause, and a first name on the sheet placing the school team for the upcoming semi-final versus Geary Road. So, now let's return to Fred and what he said to Mr. Barrington when his teacher asked him to speak up and tell everyone exactly how he did it. Chapter 24. Time to Shine. For a moment, Fred thought Mr. Barrington must have rumbled him, that he must know that he had, in a way, cheated, because he sounded a bit like teachers did when they were being sarcastic, like Mr. Barrington, having heard Fred whispering in class, was mockingly inviting him to come up and tell everyone all about the great things he had to say. But then Fred realised, looking at the sports teacher's friendly, if fishy eyes, that Mr. Barrington wasn't being sarcastic, that he genuinely thought that it was amazing how well Fred had played, and that he really wanted him to tell the rest of the school how he had done it. Fred nodded to himself. He looked to Ellie, who still had her hands up and was also now smiling at him hopefully, and so he took a deep breath and said loudly, making sure everyone could hear him, "I don't really know, Mr. Barrington. I suppose I just have a talent, an amazing talent, that I was born with." A ripple of applause greeted this. Talent, though, needs hard work to make it all it can be. He saw Mr. Barrington nod and heard some people in the crowd say, "Yes, very wise." "So, maybe up until now," Fred continued, "if I was really being honest with myself, I'd have to say I haven't truly been doing the hard work. But now I have. I finally put in the time and the sweat and practiced hard, and yes, it's paid off because..." The ripple of applause started building and building and building. Fred raised a fist in the air. "Now, it's my time to shine." The crowd erupted into a massive roar. Mr. Barrington was applauding. Fred's teammates were applauding. Even the defeated Geary Road team were applauding. The only person who wasn't applauding, who was in fact walking away sadly, was Ellie. Fred watched her go. He wanted to call after her. He wanted to tell her that he had only said that because he didn't know what else to say, that he'd got carried away with the moment. He wanted to say sorry, but all that was quite hard to do because A, she was already quite far away, and B, the crowd was cheering and chanting, "Fred! Fred! Fred!" So she wouldn't have heard him above it. And C, just as he opened his mouth to shout after her, Pradgett's legs finally went and Fred toppled headlong into Mr. Barrington, knocking him and his rhino foot lens glasses into the mud. Chapter 25. It's bananas, Morris. Actually, not everybody apart from Ellie was applauding. 2 other people weren't. They were following Ellie as she walked away from the pitch. "Stone," said a voice behind her. She turned around heavy-hearted. "Isla," she said. "Not now." "Oh, sorry, Ellie," said Isla Fawcett. "Yes, sorry, Ellie," said Morris, turning away. "Where are you going, Morris?" said Isla. Back to the match? You said sorry, so I thought we were leaving her alone." "She was being sarcastic," said Ellie. "Oh, were you?" said Morris. "Yes," said Isla. She sighed and shook her head. "Anyway, Ellie, that's odd. That you're leaving. Didn't fancy watching your brother's moment of triumph?" "I'm not interested in answering your stupid questions, Isla," said Ellie. "Another thing that's interesting is that you're always holding that controller these days." Ellie gulped. "Am I?" "Yes. I noticed you were holding it and playing with it all through the game. And I noticed you were also holding it and playing with it all through that incident in the playground the other week." "Incident? Oh, you mean when my brother completely trounced your brother and you in a fight?" That's not how I saw it." It's how I saw it, said Morris. Shut up. I'm surprised you could see anything, let alone what I was doing, when you were being juggled, said Ellie. Whatever, said Isla. Yeah, whatever, said Morris, doing a W with his fingers. Well, it actually looked like a shadow puppet person doing a very bad version of a bird. Hang on, he said. What's the next letter after W? Never mind. Just get it, said Isla. Get what? Said Ellie. But this question wasn't answered. Instead, Morris, who although slow thinking was fast moving, ran at her and grabbed the controller. Hey, she said, give that back. Isla smirked and held out her hand. Morris passed the controller to her. I said give that back, shouted Ellie, reaching for it, but Morris stood in her way. Interesting, said Isla, holding the controller up and turning it around. It's very pretty, isn't it? Give it back. Isla smiled and brought the controller closer to her face. You're certainly very bothered about it, aren't you? Just what is it about this that makes it so special? Nothing, shouted Ellie. Just leave it alone. Might it be something to do with the control stick, said Isla, circling it around, or this gold button here? Just before Isla rotated the control stick and pressed the gold button, 200 metres away, back at the football pitch, Mr. Barrington was scrambling around in the mud for his glasses. Fred was saying, I'm so sorry, Mr. Barrington, let me help you. Everyone else was watching. As Isla rotated the control stick and pressed the button, Fred whirled around in a very fast circle, swung back his left foot and then kicked out, in one powerful, graceful movement, sending Mr. Barrington's glasses all the way to the other end of the pitch, sending them, in fact, soaring into Geary Road's goal, although this one, to be fair, didn't count. Stop it! Stop doing that! Shouted Ellie. Why? What's going on? Said Isla, pressing the ruby button over and over again. Fred! Shouted Mr. Barrington, although not at him. Instead, he was peering at Pradgett, who was just getting up. I'm so sorry, Mr. Barrington. I really am, said Fred. Are you? Said Mr. Barrington, now, following the sound at least, looking towards Fred. Unfortunately, Fred was jumping up and down with his hands in the air, seeming not to be so sorry, but rather to be celebrating. Yes, I am. I'm really sorry about your glasses, he said, leaping especially high and punching the air. Well, go and get them then, said Mr. Barrington. I will, said Fred, just as Isla pushed the control stick to the left. Fred rushed off very fast in the opposite direction to where the glasses were, which was good in one sense, as that was the direction in which Mr. Barrington was mistakenly pointing. Said Isla. It's something to do with you and your twin, and the way he's suddenly got really good at everything, but I can't work out what. She looked at Ellie, who shrugged. She looked at Morris, who shrugged, although he did that when you asked him what type of fruit monkeys ate. Isla tossed the controller on the ground. But I will, she said, walking away. Chapter 26. A kind of looking down smile. When Isla threw the controller away, Fred stopped running in the wrong direction for Mr. Barrington's glasses. He shook his head as if to say, What was that all about? And turned round to go back to the changing room. Next to the posts of their goal, a grown-up was standing, a man in his mid-30s, wearing a smart black coat and with a kindly curious smile on his face. Hello, said the man. He had a hint of a foreign accent. I just watched you play. Oh, said Fred. You're good. Oh, thank you. Maybe very good. Fred nodded and gave a smile that wasn't really a proper smile, more of a kind of looking down smile, which was what he did when he was a bit embarrassed. The man took a card out of his pocket. He handed it to Fred. This is me. I might come back and watch you again in the final, just to make sure it wasn't a one-off. He smiled again and turned away. Fred looked down at the card. He had to read it 3 times before he could believe it. Chapter 27. It's a deal. I can't believe you did that. That speech after the game, taking all the credit, shouted Ellie. What was I supposed to do? What was I supposed to say? You're very kind, but it wasn't me, it was my sister, magically controlling me with the video game controller, Fred shouted back. No, but you didn't have to be quite so pleased with yourself. Well, I can't believe you did what you did, making me kick Barrington's glasses all the way down the pitch. I could have got expelled. What are you talking about? That was Isla. I didn't do anything. Well, I'm not sure I believe you. I think you were trying to teach me a lesson. Can you two keep it down in there? I'm trying to watch. Ellie and Fred stopped arguing for a second to say together, loud enough for their mother to hear enough through the playroom wall. Cash in the attic. Yes, we know. There was a short pause. Then Janine said, Actually, I'm watching another programme, I'll have you know. Ellie and Fred looked at each other. Really? Said Ellie. Yes. What's it called? Money in the Loft. It's the news show. Completely different. Fred and Ellie looked at each other again. Then they burst out laughing. Okay, said Ellie. Can we stop arguing with each other, please? Yes, please, said Fred. Look, I've been dying to show you something. What? Fred took the card out of his pocket. He held it in two hands between his thumbs and forefingers and thrust it at his sister. She squinted at it. Sven Matthias, junior football scout. Scout? Not scout as in a boy who wears a funny uniform and spends a lot of time in tents studying knots. Scout as in talent scout. It's someone who works for a football club, finding talented young players. Oh, wow! Which football club? Fred moved his finger away from the top corner of the card, revealing a blue badge, a lion holding a staff. Ellie's eyes widened. Chelsea? Chelsea Football Club? Fred grinned at her, nodding. This man wants you to come and try out for Chelsea Football Club. Well, said Fred, putting the card back in his pocket. No, he's going to come back and watch me in the final, and then decide. Wow, that's amazing. Yes, so, look, I'm sorry about what I said after the game, but you will come to the final, won't you, and control me, and I promise never to make a speech about how talented I am at football again, even in the post-match interview on Match of the Day. Ellie thought about this. Will you change me back to Cinderella? Fred frowned. Then his face cleared. Oh, I forgot, it's Rashid's party later. Ellie nodded shyly. Yes, of course, said Fred. Ellie smiled and put her hand out. It's a deal, she said. And that is where we will leave part 4 of The Person Controller by David Baddiel. I'll be back soon with the next part of this fantastic story and lots more stories and videos coming your way very soon. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.